Tom, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Gail DePriest, and I'm with the Clemson MBA Program, and I host the Clemson Business of Innovation Podcast. And we're especially excited to talk with you today because our MBA students love the stories of entrepreneurs, innovators, and especially in our program for entrepreneurship. And so it's so valuable to be able to pull in a podcast and share it in a classroom. And so we're excited to hear your story. I want to start out by saying, you might not know this, but I had the honor and the privilege of being at your 50th birthday and watching you perform with the funk band on stage. So, so that's my background with you. I know that you are a musician, and I want to be talking more about that later. But I'll start at kind of asking you about your background with your organization, kind of how all that started.
Sealevel started 34 years ago. I moved down here with NCR Corporation in Liberty. National Cash Register was a big company. They did things really well, and I really enjoyed working with them. And then they started cutting back and laying off in about 83. And so I started doing textile consulting work, and I was designing electronic systems to monitor textile looms and to count production and do things like that with computers at the time. And that was right around the time the IBM PC had come out. The textile plants have been using like mini computers and DET computers and a lot of oddball things, because before the PC there was like Radio Shack and Apple as far as small PC, but there really wasn't anything that you would put your hands around and call a business class small computer. So we started using IBM PC to do textile monitoring, and that was very successful. But at
I'm sorry, Tom, when you say textile monitoring, what does that mean?
I'm sorry, what I meant was you've got a computer in a production weave room, and it might have a sensor or some kind of microcomputer on every single loom out there. And there could be of them. And then what that does is the loom reports back how many yards of cloth it's made, how long it was stopped, what the stop type was. And so it lets the plant run efficiently and plan and do plan maintenance and things like that by being able to monitor the production. So when I say textile monitoring, I'm talking about production monitoring.
Sure.
You get an output measurement that corresponds to what you're shipping and how efficient your people are. Mm-hmm. So that was going real well, but at the same time, textiles were dying down here, unfortunately, and going offshore. And so that business wasn't doing exceptionally well, although, we had some neat products. So in the process of that, I developed a couple cards for the IBM PC at the time that did industrial control communications. And that was a real niche at the time. The IBM PC came out and it kind of exploded onto the market. And I remember being on the trip somewhere and buying a PC magazine. That was the magazine back then. And it was like 2 inches thick. It looked like some of my daughter's bride's magazines. They're just unbelievable. And most of the companies in them were small, like mom and pop startups or, garage type outfits. There was a few big players, but I realized that, you could start a company and could make a product of this thing. And so I started using my own products to do the textile equipment monitoring. And then with the textile business dying, we had parted ways amicably. And they actually were a great family business. They financed the inventory that I had for these IBM boards. And so I started Sealevel with my wife in 86. And now we're 70, some people big. And this year we're hoping to hit $30 million in sales. So we're very excited. We're doing defense communication systems. We're doing the 911 call control centers. The Harris Corporation. So Sealevel's done great.
Yeah, so the application for what you were doing just continued to be more and more.
Well, that's. I know you'll get to some good questions later on, but to share with you early, one thing I've always found was, go with something you know how to do, and kind of monopolize or capitalize on what you do well. And so learned from the textile business was that if you can make something run in a textile plant with all the noise and vibration and heat and everything, you can make it run in an army tank. I mean, it'd probably be easier.
Yeah.
Right? I had a friend who used to joke, he said, well, if you carried a can of sardines into a weave room, textile weave room, and didn't open it, and then took it home at night, when you did open it, there'd be textile lint and cotton dust. So we had this hot, noisy, dirty, greasy environment, and I can remember back underneath looms.
I've been in a weave room. I know, yeah.
It's a horrible environment. I respect the people that do and did work in that environment, but now I think a lot of it is more automated and things like that. So as that, I realized that I'm doing this now, and these things are working, and so we started just running small ads, little 2x3 ads in the back of that PC magazine, and there's another tech journal, and basically the business took off from there. It's amazing, just hard work. I was working probably 60-hour weeks, and Susan was coming in and then having kids. Not having kids, but the kids were teenagers by then.
Yeah.
But it was drop in at the office and help us pack boxes and put phone boxes. And
your family has been involved in your business as well. Is that correct?
They have, yeah. For 4 years now. So yeah,
that's kind of cool. I remember that whole time period in '83 and '84, and how people were just kind of starting to use various types of computers and so forth, and figuring it out. And what an innovative, forward-thinking, visionary kind of thing that really happened for you as you did that. You have talked about how your company does intuitive design. And what does that mean?
Intuitive design. Well, there's sort of, that's a good question. There's two ways of thinking about design. I think one is where if I came to you and said, I'd like for you to build me a house and I wanted to have 4 windows in the front and a door and a garage, you could sort of have those parameters, and so the house would probably look, similar to, what I just described. But design, I think, is more where you're empathizing with the customer. You're trying to put yourself in their position and say, what are they trying to do with this product? Mm-hmm. And products that come out on the market, and you buy it, but you realize you just can't use it, or it's not, it may meet the specs, it does the function, but I don't know, a plastic back scratcher, it does what it do. But if the thing bends and breaks in the process, then it's really not very. It met the original spec of being able to scratch one's back. So intuitive design is more being a customer for your own product always helps. If you're the end user, then you know exactly what you want that thing to do before you even start thinking about the specification. Yeah,
so a little bit like design thinking, intuitive design maybe is kind of similar.
Yeah.
And then you've also said that your products make the world a strong and safer place. So it sounds like with your defense work, talk about that a little bit. That's really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds like a marketing slogan to me. But
I read it on your website.
We've done some neat stuff at Sealevel over the years. I remember early on we built a product and they only needed 5 of them, which didn't get anybody in sales attention, of course, but it turned out it was NASA's partner, McDonnell Detweiler, up in Nova Scotia, and they built a 100-meter arm that went on the space station. And they had no way of knowing where it was. They had to radio to Houston and say, where's the arm? Because we want to start moving it, but we don't want to hit something, if something's parked beside it. And they had no video, to the outside world back then. This would have been. So what we made was a device that would monitor the position of the arm. Again, there's that word monitoring, by textile days. But if you can monitor and sense and count revolutions and things like that, you pretty much know what a piece of equipment is doing. So we built a device that would show them on a laptop display where the arm was. And that way, before they start moving the joystick, they could see physically where the arm was instead of having to radio to Houston. Mm-hmm. That was really neat. And somebody said, well, what'd you charge them for that? And I said, man, I've done it for free, just for bragging rights to be able to.
Yeah.
So we worked on the early GPS for the military before you had Garmin and Magellan. You had companies like Rockwell Collins and Magnavox, if you remember that name from years ago.
Yeah.
They actually invented GPS, and we had one of the first computer interfaces for the military version of the GPS at the time. So we got that business by saying, yes, we can, or yes, we'll try. And, you've got standard products. It's easy to say, we make A, B, and C. But when a customer says, well, I'd like A, but with a little bit of B and some D on it, can you do that? A lot of companies would say, well, I don't know, we'll get back with you. But, I've always said, yeah, let's take a look at it, or that sounds interesting. And again, it's sort of that intuitive thing. You're like, yeah, I can see why you'd want to do that. Let's try that. So we got a lot of business along the way by being not the first to market something, but one of the willing participants. Because of the Rockwells, Collins of the world, and the Magnavoxes, and the huge companies, they can't turn around a quick prototype like we could.
Right.
So engineers could call us and say, hey, we're doing this. Can you make this? And, 3 days later, we might send them something. Whereas, a big company would have taken, weeks and months, even years probably to get it done.
Tom, listening to you, I just feel like I have so many questions that I want to ask you about how you lead and so forth. But I do want to follow this trail a little bit of kind of what you've evolved into in your newer company that you've created, because I can hear the excitement around that. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, well, Sealevel evolved and we grew, and it got to be, sort of a big company. And I won't say it wasn't as much fun, but it wasn't as challenging to me to be innovative because I got away from the design engineering. We hired some great engineers, of course, and Clemson's got a great master's in computer engineering, and then a master's program in there where the guys learn software and hardware. And so, and when I came up through Virginia Tech, you either learn hardware or software as computer science, but most engineers didn't know software, and most computer science people didn't know the hardware. And as you know, the things have to work, intimately together. Or the iPhone, is a masterpiece of small hardware and pretty good software sometimes. But so Clemson's got a great program there. So we've got several really good engineers that do that design work. And so I'd gotten away from it. I've been, just more in management and things like that. And I kind of missed it. So I've always had a shop at home, and I do woodworking, I play music, I build things, I take things apart. And, I just got a real inquisitive mind and had to, find something creative to keep my, creative juices flowing and stuff. And
Sealevel is actually named for a band?
No, that's a good story. People think that, because there was a band called Sealevel, and it was Chuck Leavell's band after the Allman Brothers. Chuck Leavell originally was Chuck Level, and he told me after we got to be good friends that the press started calling him Chuck Leavell after the Allman Brothers, after he got famous with the Allman Brothers. And so he thought it sounded good, so he didn't bother to correct him. But his name was Chuck Level growing up, and I knew some Levels in Virginia growing up, pronounced it the same way, spelled it the same way. So they used to call Chuck Sealevel on the road, and they put Sealevel on his road cases. So at one point, they even had a metal road case for his grand piano. That's it, and because it looks so much like a big metal safe, they put Sealevel Safe Company, and we've got a picture in the archives. So when I was looking for a name for the company, I wanted something, and you remember this, Russ Castle had a radio show, and you could win a prize from the C line, the B line, or the A line. And one was like a trip to Hawaii, the other was like a $20 gift certificate. So I was driving home trying to think of a name, and it's kind of like naming a baby in a way. You're kind of self-conscious.
Really important, yeah.
Yeah, anything you think of, though, sounds weird to you first. You're like, what? It doesn't sound right. But so I heard Sea Line, and I wanted something like Evergreen or Wintergreen or something that didn't sound like a computer company. Because somebody, you hear the name, you're like, oh, I know they do.
Yeah.
So I walked in the door. Susan was in the house, and I said, what do you think of C? Instead of saying Sea Lion, I said Sealevel. And then she said, Sealevel what? I said, Sealevel Systems Incorporated. So the name just rolled off. But everybody accused me of naming the company after a band. But Chuck and I got to be good friends because of that.
You have just carved out an amazing life for yourself. Now, Booker Labs, what does that mean?
Well, let's keep going. So the music involved, and I was farming. I was got my old high school band back together. This is kind of funny. I had a band in high school. That's how my wife and I met, and she hired us to play. Somebody said I'm still working for her. So we got our band back together about 4 years ago. Most of them are from Virginia, and so we play that every 6 months. Now with the COVID virus, we haven't been able to do anything because the bars in Virginia aren't open. But we're all practicing and having a good time and playing. So about 20 years ago, I got back interested into Hammond organs and these Leslie rotating speakers. There's two behind me here. If you can see one in the wooden cabinet. And most people don't notice them, but you see them in funeral homes. You see one behind Greg Allman every time he was on stage. It'd be this big wooden cabinet right behind him, and he'd be playing his Hammond B3. And so what's inside this thing is a rotating speaker. It's actually a speaker that's fixed, but then a baffle above it rotates, and it gives it this wah, 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 wah. And they're great, and they still work. But if you bounce one around, if you put it in the back of a truck, those two motors are liable to get out of alignment. And it's a real pain. keyboard player to align those motors. And so my first thought with Booker Lab, and I'll get to the name of that in a minute too, but was why not come up with a motor replacement system, like using a DC motor, one motor instead of two. It'd be easy to interface. And so I started developing that with the Sealevel engineers' help. And we went to the NAMM show in 2018. NAMM is the National Association of Music Merchandisers. And it was mind-boggling. I mean, it's out in Anaheim, California. And there's like a hall the size of like the convention center in Greenville just for tubas and trumpets. And then there's another one for stringed instruments. And there's another one for keyboards. It's just really, really neat. But so we went out and we took our Leslies with us and we had these motors. And I realized then, this was one of your questions too, about how do you handle mistakes or not, how do you regroup? I realized at the show from talking to people, and I'd done some research. I mean, it wasn't like I just went into it blind. But the motor system we come up with was too big, too heavy, too expensive, too bulky. Didn't really, so like I said before, it met the functional spec, but it wasn't really an innovative solution.
Right.
But it did meet the spec. It would spin them like it was supposed to. But everybody kind of looked at it and said, well, that's neat, but, And so I hung on to every word everybody said. And I found another bit of advice for young entrepreneurs is that you learn a whole lot more with your ears open and your mouth shut. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of gotten outspoken probably in my older age now. But as a youngster, I was a little bit more absorbing and listening. So I listened, and we came back, and we're still working on the motors, but we didn't release it as a product. Sort of ate a crow sandwich there or whatever. But you do that with humility and say, yeah, we learned a lot from the show, and we decided to hold off releasing this product. We're still working on it. There's new technology coming out. You can and I still am working on motors, and there's some exciting things happening with motors. But motors aren't the big problem that I thought they were initially. But, I wasn't going to give up, walk away embarrassed or, ashamed. I said, okay, well, there's a bunch of other things we can do, and here's a couple of them. We actually had some other products at the show. So I probably got 5 years worth of products in my mind, and staying current with something all the way through development until it gets done, because I'm moving on to the next thing. And, sometimes I just have to stop and take a break because I've got to wait for what I've done to catch up.
It's very iterative is what I'm hearing. Very iterative. You just keep going and creating and letting it kind of sink in and seeking advice and sometimes walking away for a while.
Yeah, we need to. But I think it's part ADD and part to some extent. But I think those are desirable traits, honestly, for entrepreneurs. I don't think they hurt you. I think I was probably dyslexic too, but learned to overcome it. But I've never been tested or anything.
I'm curious to know about, and I know you want to tell me more maybe about Booker Lab, but you're an inventor, you're a creator, you have that strong ability to do all of that ideation, and but with a strong focus on really what's needed in the market. Back constantly clarifying what's needed in the market. I hear that strongly. What was it like for you managing so many employees? Because that may not have been your favorite part.
I didn't. I'm not the detail guy. Susan did for 13 years, and then we hired professional managers, and my son has run the company since till last December. But
okay.
Started the business in January, doing facial temperature testing. And it's like access control for the virus. So I hope he does.
A bit of a pivot here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bit of a pivot. Yeah, I like that. So, but no. So Susan's back running Sealevel. I'm involved with the day-to-day, but I never managed all that many people. It's just wasn't my style. I'm not a detail guy. I can read a statement and I understand it. And obviously, if you're designing products, you've got to be able to build them competitively priced and be able to build them at a price you can live with. But my eyes start to glaze over when I look at accounting statements. I mean, it just doesn't interest me. At the end of the day, and I felt like I was more of an entrepreneur than a businessman, more of an inventor than a businessman. You can go into something and say, well, I'm planning on netting 20% return on investments and all this technical, accounting talk. Or you can say, I'm planning on building a really neat product and I'm going to see how many of them sell. And we might just sell a whole bunch of them, I mean, and I'm not saying I never had a business plan. You obviously have to do all that. But sometimes, those things are just totally pro forma nonsense. I mean, it's pie in the sky, wishful thinking.
Well, there's always that granular aspect of it, but I do think that inventors and creatives think about financial things more conceptually. Yeah, they get it. They may go with a percentage or whatever, but they get it conceptually, and they're looking at it. They just don't want to, they're bored sometimes with the details of it. So it's wonderful that you had your wife to kind of be that part of the business.
Yeah, she's very detail oriented, so that was a real asset. And, of course, in conversation at night, she'd want to talk detail, and I'd be like, well, we got a new product that does this,
It sounds like you're a great pair. It sounds like you're a wonderful pair.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, but we play off each other's strengths and weaknesses. So, But so in the process of wanting to find something to do, I've been messing with music equipment. I thought, why don't I start a company? Well, my middle name was Booker. My grandfather's name was Lyle Still Booker. He was a surgeon in Durham, North Carolina. Depression. He actually did the first surgery at Duke Hospital, and then went on to develop Hope Valley. He was a realtor and a surgeon. Doctors generally don't make that great a businessman. So the Depression hit, he went bankrupt, moved back to Virginia. But Hope Valley is still a huge area of Durham. Developed Booker Creek there. There's Booker Field was where the Durham Bulls played. He owned the Durham Bulls before the Depression. Again, lost it all in the Depression. My father from Philadelphia, his dad was a developer, and he lost everything in the Depression. So I was raised by two Depression-era victims, if you will. There's a lot of, and so you learn frugality. You learn to make things instead of buy them. You learn to save.
You do. You learn to be resourceful and to repurpose. And I agree.
Yeah. So go ahead.
And sometimes I wonder with children of affluence, if they learn those things, in the same way, because they maybe didn't have to. So
they struggle with that. And grandkids now, I mean, everything's so disposable. Yeah. We just I never flew in a small private plane until I was about 30. My kids flew in one when they were 15, and my grandkids flew in one when they were 15 days. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like your wants become your needs, and you got to still try to raise kids with sense of values, obviously, and respect what you got. But live in a throwaway society now. It's kind of a shame because growing up, we fixed bicycles, we built mini bikes. We had to do scrounge things. But those are all good traits, and I think it helps you run a business. When so many people, like if you take over a business or you buy into a business, you might not be as sensitive to what went into making the quality of the product. Good examples of that were Harley Davidson got bought by AMF, and remember oils leaking on the floor, showroom floors. Hammond got bought by CBS, by Suzuki. I'm sorry. Fender got bought by CBS all during the 60s around the same time. And all the bean counters got involved, no offense. And so the quality of the product went downhill because they started using cheaper this on these Leslie speakers during the 70s. They started using MDF particle board for the shelves internally instead of plywood. Well, people think plywood sounds better. Plywood is real wood. Particle board's kind of ground up sawdust, with glue mixed with it. So, the good news is that all these companies have seen a resurgence. Harley came back as stronger than before. Fender came back stronger than before, and Hammond hit well. So I think, when you get away from the innovation and get away from the founder's principles, again, you can start suffering quality of product. So the other thing we're finding as far as product goes is that, people like the old tube amps, the old vintage amplifiers from the 60s and 70s. So even though Hammond is making new Leslies, most people don't want them, sadly. And you can find Leslie for actually cheaper than a new one. And the vintage one has been running for 40, 50 years. The new one might have problems next year because it's using, newer, lower cost parts. Yeah, so
newer isn't necessarily better.
Mm-hmm. We're finding that you really can't build a new product as good as some of these old products. I mean, you could, but they still want to. And the older products just seem to sound better and last longer.
Tom, you have, I just admire how you've been able to kind of evolve through your career and really follow the thread of your interest throughout your career as you've moved on and now Booker Labs and so forth. What do you feel like, looking back, you're maybe most proud of? Or are you most grateful for in your career? If you had to kind of point to one thing.
the success that Sealevel has had has enabled myself and my family to give back and provide, and that's a really good feeling. I mean, I know a lot of people say that, but I mean, I think we live it here with the community. We've been involved in a whole bunch of different things, for everything from economic development to the county industrial park to things like that. And so it's not that I'm proud that I built a company that has enabled 70 some lives to be better and enabled my family to continue to do good things and support the things we support. So.
Yes, and I've read about a lot of the model, in your county that really helps young people get employed and really raise the, prospects for their getting good jobs going forward. And even, written up by the New York Times. So I definitely know about that. I do want to know what is the best advice you've ever received?
Well, one was to go back to college. I dropped out of college and didn't know what I wanted to do. A good friend of mine's dad, I was working for him, and he took me back to the back of the warehouse and said, "What are you doing here?" Because I'd figured out all the numbers in this company, this plumbing supplies. And I said, "I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do." And he said, "You don't belong here. So go back to college." And I did. And was, unfortunately, my parents had said that, but I ignored them.
Of course.
From someone you're working for, and he's like, you don't need to be here. You can do a whole lot better. The other advice I think I mentioned to you, and this was sort of self-learned, but you learn a lot more with your mouth shut. So I think just absorbing, listening, respect. You don't know it all at a young age, and you don't know it all at an old age. There's an expression I do like, and it's that I'll say I'll be politically correct. They don't know what they don't know. And if you think about that, like a young person typically, they don't know what they don't know. You and I found out what we don't know the hard way, or we've got years and battle scars to prove that we didn't know everything. And so, knowing what you don't know is a great strength. You would go to a foreign country and say, I'm going to set up operations without having done all the research. So, I mean, knowing what you don't know is a great strength. When I went to that NAMM show, I walked in and just, in all, I wasn't going to tell anybody anything because I didn't know anything, compared to all the people there. So I think humility is a real asset.
Definitely. So that's probably served you well as a leader, that humility, that respect, that ability to listen.
It's got me in trouble a few times, too. I get both.
So, Tom, what do you want to accomplish going forward?
Well, I'd like to keep doing what we're doing. Booker Lab is a lot of fun. What we're doing there is creating new products that interface the old products to new products. I know that sounds like a lot of words. These big speakers, people still like them, but they don't like the big Hammond organ as much as they used to because it weighs 500 pounds and takes up the size of a kitchen table. So now lighter weight combo organs that sound almost as good, but people still want the vintage speakers. So we found a real niche in building like a multi-interface connectivity product. But it's kind of like you can connect to X, Y, or Z, not just X or Y or Z. We give you all three. Got multiple things you can plug in. If you want to hook to an OHanlan, you can. But if you want to plug in one of these newfangled lightweight keyboards, you can real easily too. So we're trying to come up with like Swiss Army knife type products, if you will. That's what we use.
Yeah.
Kind of problem solving. It's sort of bringing a new world approach to, or more modern approach to the 50s and 60s era Hammond stuff, where Hammond mentality was you had an organ in a church and a speaker, and you didn't need multiple connections. It's kind of like if Hammond didn't do it in the 60s, then you don't need to do it. Why would you want to do anything different? Well, things evolve. We're doing stuff with all kinds of computers and equipment.
When do you get your best ideas?
Probably talking to customers, honestly, and hearing what they're trying to do. Because I'm not a keyboard player, so I try to empathize, and that's where the intuitive stuff again comes in. I'm sort of in stretch mode because not being a professional keyboard player, I can only imagine what they may want to do with this knobs or how much treble or how much bass. So that's where you have to kind of get intuitive. But what we've done, and a friend of mine called it best practices marketing, we've approached a whole bunch of professional musicians, guys like Joey DeFrancisco. He's a jazz great Hammond organ guy, legendary. We've got the Who's keyboard player. We got Leonard Skinner. We've approached Booker T. Jones, his family. Daughter and son manage his affairs, and Booker T and MGs were kind of legendary. Still
yes,
are.
they were.
So we've approached these artists and friendly and provided them with eval units. We didn't worry about you got to pay me. It's so many $100 in shipping and credit card. It's more like, let me put one in your hands and see how you like it. And if you like it, I know you're going to tell people, and I'm not going to charge you for it. If you don't like it, send it back. And so far, we've had great success. We've got the Revivalists from New Orleans.
I love them.
Yeah, they
got
were
a great sound. Yeah.
So Michael Gerardo's a keyboard player. He hung out with us at NAMM and Tower of Power. Great. I mean, we've got some great bands using our equipment. And so I'm very excited about that. We shipped about 60-some units since the first of the year, which is really neat. And we keep innovating. But
that's so clever. That's such a clever way to do it. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sell one, but at the same time, I'd rather give away a couple and then sell 100 than not give away any and wonder why you didn't sell any. Sort of the Jimmy. I mean, I've always believed that you can't be an impediment to doing business with yourself.
Tom, your wheels are always turning. I love it. They
are. Thank you.
Are you playing music a lot these days?
Well, I've been building more guitars than I've been playing. Actually, I've got to do something with my hands, and I stay busy all the time. So I've been building some basses for friends, and but practice by yourself is not that much fun. I go up to the music room and I'll put on a playlist or something, play along with it. But you've really got to be playing with people to have a good time. And there's a couple of keyboard players and guitar players down here that I've messed with, and I really need to start a band down here because honestly, all my old high school buddies are in Virginia. Roanoke and Richmond, and so it's great when I go up there, to get together. But I need a local outlet here.
You've been very generous with your time talking about your journey and some of your inspiration and what's excited you. If you had advice for our students and other people who want to be more innovative and who want to create, what would that advice be?
Probably, I mean, first of all, it's easy to say, but, go for it. Don't be afraid to. Think outside the box. A lot of people think, I've got this idea, but it's probably a dumb idea. Then they end it at that or something like that. But there's ways you can pursue ideas without having to come up with a bunch of money. There's, some of the things I did early on was, Google the name you're thinking of. Why not? You don't have to go do a trademark search and things like that. Just Google it and see if it's used. If it's not, so there's a lot of steps you can take that don't require a lot of money. A lot of people are afraid. I started Sealevel with a note for $15,000. My dad co-signed and my mom got mad. yeah. That's parents for you. But later, so obviously I don't regret that at all. But $15,000 wasn't a lot of money today. I mean, it is, but I'm just saying it wasn't a lot to start a company that's growing like we have. But I would say, think outside the box, go for it, be innovative, figure out, build a prototype in your house. I was doing something for this. This is a little side note, but believe it or not, I had to make something. And when I describe to you what I made, you will die. I bought a hat box, 14-inch hat box from Amazon in cardboard. And then I bought a bundt cake pan also. And then I bought 2-part urethane foam that you mix, like that super foam stuff you put in the walls. And it was to build a prototype rotor that goes in one of these things. And basically, I poured the foam into the hat box with the bundt cake pan in there, and then let the foam set up. And when I removed the bundt cake pan, I had this inverted rotor thing that actually no idea I could have made myself, but without the hat box and the bundt cake pan. Figure out a way to do it. You don't have to go spend a bunch of money to do it. Build it, in your backyard. And,
that's a great story. I love that. I'm so glad you shared that with me.
Yeah, I was cleaning my garage yesterday, and I came across the bundt pan and the hat box, and I went ahead and threw them away. But I thought, hanging on a wall somewhere.
Well, I think the next thing we're ready for is seeing you on stage with your band. We need to see that. I feel that's coming.
When we finish that house in TR, we'll have a big party and do that there.
I'm gonna definitely follow up with you on that. Now, I do have a question I want to ask you, and I always like to ask this in my podcast. We've talked a lot about innovation and your journey and how you've created and been resourceful and really, I mean, you've helped at least 70 lives change and become involved in a mission, and you've contributed to the community. I want to know, in your own words, though, how you might like to be remembered.
I think a lot of my ambition has been growing up. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and my dad was a doctor, so it was kind of hard living with this figure that's also like a local hero in a way. And so I won't say I've been an overachiever, but I think I've tried to achieve. But at some point, again, it's not about you personally. It's more about what you can do. I know it sounds dumb to say. I mean, I live very comfortably. I'm very happy with that, and I'm more interested in. I think I mentioned recently we're trying to get Wi-Fi throughout the whole county for the 6-year-old kids that don't have the internet, and things like this. This is the kind of neat things you can do. Achieve what I call moderate success. So, it's not about you anymore. It's more about the lives you affect and having fun. Honestly, I mean, if you're not having fun, you might as well not be doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome, Tom. Thank you so much, and it's just been a hoot to listen to you and to learn more about you. And I'll be really excited to get to share this podcast with our students in the classroom as they think about what they want to create and try to figure out their way. So can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and can't tell you how much I look forward to seeing what's next for you, Tom OHanlan.